All praises to the Most High, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, Bahashem Raha Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, laboring in this truth in all sincerity. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on right now in the news, and I really couldn't make up my mind on which topic to try to address first, so the Spirit jumped on me to just do something I haven't really done previously, which is to just upload one video and try to hit on various topics. So I took a few notes, wrote down some scriptures, and I'm just going to try to go with the Spirit and do my best to get as much in this particular video as possible. So with that being said, I'm going to start off with Matthew chapter 24, verses 6 through 8, and I'll read this in the NLT. And you will hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. But all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. So this is an article off of the U.S. Sun, written by an individual by the name of Forrest McFarland approximately 6 hours ago. Terrifying swarm of earthquakes rocks area near mysterious U.S. military base known for nuclear testing. So earthquakes have been rattling the grounds near a mysterious military testing range that's known for stockpiling nuclear weapons. The Tonopah test range in Nevada, also called Area 52, has seen over 100 seismic events in the last week alone. So we know about Area 51. Supposedly, that's where some alien spacecraft crash landed, and they decided to make a laboratory or test facility of that particular spaceship that crash landed. We know that to be bullshit. That's basically what they put in the movie Independence Day, the original one back around 1995 or 1996, if I'm correct. But here is Area 52 now, where they have nuclear weapons that they store at this particular base. And there's been a range of earthquakes hitting this region lately. Nothing major. I think the largest I saw may have been at 3.9, but I'll continue to read. The range, which is around 3 hours northeast of Las Vegas and close to Area 51, experienced a wide range of events from small magnitude tremors to small earthquakes. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the latest spate of quakes began on Sunday afternoon and continued through the early hours of Monday morning. One of the latest tremors was a magnitude 3.9 earthquake, which can be felt by the average person on the ground. Although the range is shrouded in mystery, it's known for stockpiling nuclear weapons and testing nuclear weapon delivery systems. The disturbing seismic events have come right as the U.S. is embroiled in a Middle East bombing blitz with Iran after assisting Israel with coordinated attacks that killed Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So I'll stop there. The rest of the article is basically going into the bombing of Iran right now. So, but just like verse 7 stated, and earthquakes in diverse places. So you have to appreciate how the Most High, strategically plans these things. A major nuclear weapons facility is built along a fault line. The Most High can easily take that place apart. If these nuclear bases are built on fault lines, then, that can obviously disrupt technical operations or completely disable them, basically stopping Babylon from even getting a shot off, or you may see a situation where these particular missiles, they start blowing up right here upon launch, right over Babylon, in addition to Babylon's enemies raining down on them. So that kind of brings me to Jeremiah chapter 50, verses 24 and 25. And once again, I'll read this in the NLT. Listen, Babylon, for I have set a trap for you. You are caught, for you have fought against Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai has opened his armory and brought out his weapons to vent his fury. The terror that falls upon the Babylonians will be the work of the sovereign Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai of heaven's armies. So if we read this in the KJV verse 24, I have laid a snare for thee, and thou art also taken, O Babylon. Let's look up the word snare. And let's see how that's pronounced.
Strong's H3369. Yakosh. Yakosh.
So that would be Yakosh. And we see that snare, to lure, entice, snare, lay a snare, or lure, set a trap, to lay snares, figure of the devices of the wicked, fowlers, to be ensnared, be caught by a bait, to be entrapped. So set a trap, to lay snares or traps, to be ensnared or entrapped. This is from the Oxford American Dictionary according to Google AI overview. Entrap, catch someone or something in or as in a trap. She was entrapped by family expectations. Similar, trap, snare, ensnare. Trick or deceive someone, especially by inducing them to commit a crime in order to secure their prosecution. He argued that his client had been entrapped by an undercover police officer. So now with that being said, let's take a look at Isaiah 47:11. I'll read this in the KJV first. Therefore shall evil come upon thee, thou shalt not know from whence it riseth, and mischief shall fall upon thee. Thou shalt not be able to put it off, and desolation shall come upon thee suddenly, which thou shalt not know. The NLT reads as, so disaster will overtake you, and you won't be able to charm it away. Calamity will fall upon you, and you won't be able to buy your way out. A catastrophe will strike you suddenly, one for which you are not prepared. So we've heard Nero talking about building an iron dome over Babylon. Even if you could do that, or even if you had the time to do so, it wouldn't stop your own nukes from possibly malfunctioning and hitting you. Once again, Isaiah 47:11 in the NLT says a catastrophe will strike you suddenly, one for which you are not prepared. And that is that snare, that is that trap right there. So you're looking at basically this particular nuclear facility being built along a fault line. This is that trap that the Most High says that he has Babylon caught up in. If your pride and joy, your weapons, what makes the other nations fear attacking you is your nuclear supply. But if that's built along a fault line and having some seismic activity right now, this is that trap. This is the Most High. This is that snare that he laid for you. This is that snare that you're about to get caught up in. What happens when you can't fire your nukes, or you can't fire all of them? Because I went through this in an earlier video. The U.S. has what's called an all or nothing policy, meaning if China, Russia, or whatever country, if any country ever launches one nuclear weapon at the United States, their policy is all or nothing, which means that they are going to immediately launch every single nuke that they have. So if you're talking about the ones that come up out of the silos, you're looking at a few hundred of those, in addition to whatever they have that can be mounted on whatever aircraft that they have, whatever torpedoes on submarines that they have. The U.S. is just going to basically go ham. They're going to basically, if you launch one at us, we're launching every single one that we have. That's their all or nothing policy. But if you look at these scriptures again and understand that the Most High is saying here, a catastrophe, this is verse 7 in the NLT, a catastrophe will strike you suddenly, one for which you are not prepared. And we're looking at what's happening with these particular, this at least Area 52, where there's been a series of earthquakes right along with this particular base is set up, where they stockpile their nukes, some of their nukes. That can be detrimental to the U.S. in terms of, their defense capabilities. So let's go back to let's go back to Isaiah 47:11. Therefore shall evil come upon thee, thou shalt not know from whence it riseth, and mischief shall fall upon thee, thou shalt not be able to put it off, and desolation shall come upon thee suddenly, which thou shalt not know. That's not the one. I do apologize. Jeremiah 50:24 is what I wanted to go back to. And this is in the NLT. Listen, Babylon, for I have set a trap for you. You are caught, for you fought against Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. So, and I just went through that actually. The Most High has set this trap. He's laid a snare for Babylon, just as it says in Jeremiah 50:24. Let's scroll down to Jeremiah 50:45 here. And this is going to kind of lead me into the next topic here. I just wanted to open the video up with those particular series of earthquakes that has been hitting that base in Nevada, that nuclear facility, I should say, in Nevada. And that is where the U.S. stockpiles a lot of their nuclear weapons. So Jeremiah 50:45, and I'll read this in the KJV. Therefore, hear ye the counsel of Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, that he hath taken against Babylon, and his purposes, that he hath purposed against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make thy habitation desolate with them. So this current issue with Iran is the next phase of the state of Israel attempting to expand its current borders. Of course, in addition to the U.S. wanting control of Iran's oil, just like they took control of Venezuela's, the U.S. is trying to cripple China in its race for AI dominance. And that is the whole purpose of the U.S. Basically, bam, we're going into Venezuela, we're taking their oil. Bam, now we're going into Iran, we're taking their oil. And this is also why they wanted Greenland. Greenland is rich in natural resources like that. So, one, it enriches the United States. Two, you beat China to the punch in terms of who's going to dominate the next frontier, so to speak, as far as, dominating the AI technology. So, like I said, the U.S. is basically trying to cripple China in this race. So, but that's another topic. So back to Israel wanting to expand its borders. We've all heard the term Greater Israel by now. So the least of the flock, which is the state of Israel, they've drawn Babylon in, just as Jeremiah 50:45 tells us. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. So Israel is moving in ways that is contrary to what the scriptures say in regards to their borders expanding, with this whole notion of Greater Israel. If we take a look at Isaiah 26:15, and I'll read this in the NLT. O Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, you have made our nation great. Yes, you have made us great. You have extended our borders, and we give you the glory. But Israel, as the state of Israel, I should say, has taken it upon themselves to attempt to expand its own borders in pursuit of a greater Israel. If we scroll down to verse 20, though, we look at the subheading, Restoration for Israel. Go home, my people, and lock your doors. Hide yourselves for a little while until Yahweh's anger has passed. So we do understand that the Most High is going to fight this final battle. The Most High, I should say, his only begotten son, Hamashiach Yahushua. He's sending his only begotten son, Hamashiach Yahushua, to fight this battle. So when Israel is sitting here bombing nations and they're saying that they're doing so, in the name of whatever God that they're, whoever it is that they pray to, I guess, we can see, and while they're using the scriptures, we can see that, they're off. We can see that they are truly the imposters. They do not measure up to what prophecy says. Nothing that they're doing outside of being the wicked. Actually, you cannot make that correlation as to how the state of Israel believes that they are the chosen people, especially when they feel that they're going to inherit the land by their own accord. The whole purpose of the Israelites being put back into the land is for the glory of the Most High, Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai. The state of Israel believes that they can do that themselves, which is just not true. They feel that, hey, we can do this. We can take the bull by the horns as long as the U.S. backs us up. We should be able to take this and, move forward with this idea of greater Israel. And that's just not according to scriptures. So let's go to chapter 27 here, the very next chapter over, and I'll start at verse 6. The time is coming when Jacob's descendants will take root. Israel will bud and blossom and fill the whole earth with fruit. So right now, the small hats occupying the state of Israel, they're not filling the whole earth with fruit, as the scripture says, at least not good fruit, I should say. They're filling the whole earth with, debauchery and wickedness. It doesn't matter the form of wickedness, whether it's starting wars, manipulating global markets, introducing new genders, child pornography, Hollywood, pharmaceuticals, whatever. If it's wicked, they're right there in the midst of it. So no matter how much they pretend to be the people, or how many times, I should say, they put a rabbi on TV to attempt to break down scriptures, basically all you would have to do at this point is just apply Matthew chapter 7. You go to Matthew chapter 7 and start at verse 15, and I'll read down to verse 20. NLT, beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruit, that is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. Yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. And that's what we're seeing with these small hats. They're basically wicked. The state of Israel, by its actions, in the pursuit of greater Israel, they're really trying to sidestep what scriptures actually say, and they're showing their fruit. So let's go back to Jeremiah 50 and 45. Listen to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai's plans against Babylon and the land of the Babylonians. Even the little children will be dragged off like sheep, and their homes will be destroyed. And I'll read that in the KJV as well. Therefore, hear ye the counsel of Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai, that he hath taken against Babylon, and his purposes, that he hath purposed against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them. And that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to get rained down upon with nukes as well. But that land is going to be cleansed. That actually, the nuclear fire is going to be that cleansing fire. It's going to cleanse the land. And then this is how the children of the Most High, Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai, this is how Yasharallah ends up back in their land. So I want to go to an actual news article here that I came across as well. The Jerusalem Post, and this is in regards to, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. So this particular article is off of Reuters, dated March 2nd, 2026 at approximately 2:30 p.m. Britain, France, Germany ready to step into defense interests against Iran. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer additionally said that his country has accepted a U.S. request to use British bases for defensive strikes against Iranian missile and storage depot or launchers. The leaders of Britain, France, and Germany said they were ready to take steps to defend their interests in the region after the indiscriminate and disproportionate missile attacks by Iran on Sunday. We will take steps to defend our interests and those of our allies in the region, potentially fire missiles and drones at their source, the leaders of the so-called E3 said in a statement. So these particular nations, we can see how Jeremiah 50 and 45 is applying now. Surely the least of the flock, that is the state of Israel, is drawing them in. They're drawing them out, I should say, and into this war here. We have agreed to work together with the U.S. and allies in the region on this. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer additionally said on Sunday that his country has accepted a United States request to use British bases for defensive strikes against Iranian missiles and storage depots or launchers. The United States has requested permission to use British bases for that specific and limited defensive purpose. We have taken the decision to accept this request to prevent Iran firing missiles across the region, he said in a video. He said on a message on X. I'll pretty much leave it there. Let me see if there's anything else of importance. British citizens at risk. Our decision that the UK would not be involved with the strikes on Iran was deliberate, not least because we believe that the best way forward for the region and for the world is a negotiated settlement, one in which Iran agrees to give up any aspirations to develop a nuclear weapon, he said. But Iran is striking British interests, nonetheless, and putting British people at huge risk. British partners in the Gulf had asked it to do more to defend them, he said, and it was his duty to protect British lives. So eventually, with this being said, Russia, China, North Korea, they'll eventually get involved, right? At this point, they're going to have to, and the state of Israel, they're basically right now, Nero and the state of Israel are painting them into a corner, particularly Russia and China. Like I mentioned earlier, Babylon has taken control of Venezuela's oil, and they're pretty much on their way of taking over Iran's. These two countries were supplying China with significant amounts of oil. If we take a look at this particular article, or this Google AI overview, I should say. All right. How much oil was Venezuela and Iran supplying to China? I'm going to skim through this really fast. As of 2026, China imports a significant amount of discounted sanctioned oil from Iran and Venezuela to fuel its private refineries. Iran supplies a massive portion of its exports to China, averaging roughly 1.5 to 1.6 million barrels per day, representing about 90% of its total exports. Venezuela is a smaller supplier, with imports averaging roughly 500 to 394 barrels per day. That was back in 2025. Those were the averages. So right now, with the U.S. taking control of Venezuela and now possibly Iran, this is going to, greatly hinder the Chinese economy. So like I said, they're going to have to react eventually here. They can't. I'm pretty sure by now China has come up with an agreement with the U.S. to purchase Venezuelan oil, but are they getting 392 to 394,000 barrels per day? Possibly. I don't know the ins and outs of that agreement, but it's going to be on the U.S.'s terms. It's not going to be, whereas China probably has something worked out with Venezuela. Hey, if you give us this particular amount of oil at this kind of discount price, we'll protect you. But you see how that turned out. The U.S. went right in there, snatched a Maduro. China was nowhere to be found. And here we go again. The U.S. ran up in Iran with Israel this particular time. Russia and China nowhere to be found. So right now the world is watching, and it's looking like Russia and China, they're slow to react, but these are very methodical world leaders here, especially when it comes to Russia and China. If you watch any interviews or any programming with Vladimir Putin, translated obviously, or not Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping from China, these are very methodical men in their thinking. They're not going to rush on anything here, especially regarding Babylon, because they also do know how volatile Trump's way of thinking is. So, eventually, though, like I said, these particular countries, Russia and China, North Korea as well, they're going to eventually have to, do something, because right about now, the U.S. is making serious moves here. Like I said, they've already gone into Venezuela, now Iran. They had ambitions to going into Greenland, Nigeria, Cuba, so right now they're on the move. But like I said, that desperation, is going to set in. Babylon is flexing their muscles. Nero has basically taken control of Venezuela. Like I said, he killed 49 of Iran's top officials. He's already made that play for Greenland. He also put a strong hold on Mexico, basically to go after the cartels. He, like I said, he threatened Nigeria, Cuba. I mean, even later on tonight was already started now. It's 11:18 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time right now. So right now they should be test launching the Minuteman III missiles out of Vandenberg Air Force Base, or Space Force Base now. And this was the video that I did yesterday. So right now, like I said, Babylon is really flexing their muscles right now. So we understand, this is what the book of Revelation tells us. The devil is going to come down with great wrath. And that's what we're seeing. It's funny because if you look at some of the world coverage of what's happening with the U.S., the state of Israel, and Iran, you see a lot of people celebrating. You're actually seeing a lot of Iranians and all over the world, particularly in Iran, but even here in this country. You're starting to see them. Yes, there's some protesters out there, like in New York and stuff. A lot of those are, just white liberals amongst them, just there, with them same silly rallying cries, whatever those little songs they be singing in cadence while they're trying to march or whatever, but you're actually seeing a lot of Iranians celebrating this. You're starting to see a lot of the Democrats start to fall in line. I'm sorry, the Republicans are starting to fall in line right now. And CNN, CNN has kind of been on the fence right here. They've been kind of straddling the fence, but lately it's kind of looking like they've been saying, hey, Trump is not doing such a bad job here. So right now, as far as optics, it looks like Trump is getting busy. It looks like Nero is really doing his thing in there. He's really putting in that work. But, like I said, it's just optics right now. We do know something about Babylon to be true. The longer a war goes on, and right now you already had 6 casualties just in the first couple of days. So the longer a war goes on, the worse it becomes for America, not necessarily militarily, but in terms of how the news is going to start putting out propaganda, how the news is going to start swaying people like, hey, you guys are still in this war, you lost X amount of people. So the idea is to be in and out. You don't want this thing to drag on. The longer it drags on, the more you're going to get Russia, China, North Korea involved. So The idea is to end this thing fast. That's what Babylon would like to do, but will it play out that way? That remains to be seen. So, but like I said, the world is watching basically to see what Russia, China, North Korea are really going to do. So I want to play a video here that I came across, and this is Glenn Beck. This is actually someone I haven't heard from in a while, and I stumbled across this video. So I'm just going to go ahead and play this for a minute.
There used to be the Axis and Allies powers, and the Axis powers were Germany and Japan and Italy and all those that fought for, the Axis powers of Hitler, okay? That Axis is now called CRINC, and CRINC, C, China, R, Russia, I, Iran, and NK, North Korea, CRINC, okay? And that is this authoritarian group of states and scholars and strategists and everything else that are growing this anti-Western coordination, and they have shared interests. They're not working all in lockstep, but they work together. It's not a formal alliance like NATO or the Warsaw Pact, but it is shorthand to understand who is on the opposing side of the West, okay? Now, why is this relevant? Because as we look to Iran in this conflict, what is he doing? Well, by taking out Iran, China loses all of that oil that they must have. They're also sending tech to Iran, which will help Iran even slave more people. But also they are sending supersonic missile technology, and they're working with Iran on that, okay? You've got to stop that. So you've hurt Iran with its financial, with its energy, with its oil. Russia, they need the Russian oil for money. They sell their oil. They also work with Iran to get all of that oil to China. But more importantly, with Russia, they build all of Russia's drones. So when you look at the Russian drones, knowing that they're all coming from Iran, this takes that out, which helps then the war in Ukraine. Dugin just said, think of this. Dugin just said, Alexander Dugin, he was called Putin's brain for a while. He just said that if Iran falls, Russia falls as well. Now, in a way, I hope that's not true because I don't want more destabilization, but I do want the teeth pulled out of that tiger. Okay? So, by hurting Iran, you are also trying to solve that. You don't think he's going to have more leverage? You know that Putin called Trump this weekend and said, hey, let's sit back down at the table and talk about Ukraine. Okay? It's already starting to happen. This guy is like a nuclear chain reaction. He does one thing and all of these other things happen because of that. All these dominoes start to fall. And if you don't, you can disagree with that, but not that that is happening. You can disagree with, I don't think that's the right thing to do, or I don't think it's going to work out, whatever. But you cannot deny that all of these things are connected, or you're not worth talking to because you're not thinking deeply enough, okay? Just last week, we found out that India was switching. It's always played this middle ground, hey, I'm friends with Russia. Oh, Russia, I'm friends with the United States. And they've played us back and forth for a long time. Trump just got them to come into our camp. Now, why is that important? Because you've been hearing the dollar is going to fall, and China and Russia and the BRICS nations are trying to create their own currency to collapse the American dollar. Have it stop being the world's reserve currency. Who is the one that started BRICS? It's the I in BRICS, India. They're now on our side. Plus, you look at Venezuela. What did he do in Venezuela? What did he just say about Cuba? It looks like Cuba is in so much trouble. They may just say, hey, can we make a deal with the United States? That takes Cuba and Venezuela out of the China and the Russia camp. Are you beginning to see how this is all connected? Plus, all of the Iranian terrorist proxies are in Venezuela and Cuba and also on our shores because they're being sent and trained in places like Venezuela. So once you have all of this, then you begin to see the whole picture. And you can come to the conclusion, being anti-war does not mean being anti-strength. We have to be strong. Being pro-peace does not mean tolerating endless destabilization. Sometimes the most peaceful leader is the one most willing to use force decisively, quickly. Force that does not become perpetual. Force, again, that takes the air out of people who are your enemies, takes the air out of their lungs, and they go, oh my gosh, don't ever do that again. Okay? The test is going to be, does this shorten conflict or seed the next generation of conflict? And only history can answer. No pundit, no, not me, nobody else can answer that. They all have their opinions. You don't know what this is going to cause. And I said to the TV all weekend long, neither do you, Jack. Neither do you. Right now, our job is to think clearly enough that when history does have the answer, we recognize why.
So once again, that was Glenn Beck, pretty much breaking down how Nero is painting these nations into a corner right now. Basically, like I said, desperation is eventually going to set in. So, we do understand, when you corner an animal, that's when they're the most dangerous. So that's something to keep an eye on, as we wait for these prophecies to finish playing out. And we do have just 3 major prophecies remaining. That is, Jacob's trouble, the implementation of the RFID micro C-hip, which is the mark of the beast, and then the World War III, the third woe, which is going to those 3 prophecies are going to pretty much all coincide. And, then there's the deliverance, so right now we are at the beginning stages. Right now the U.S. has just entered what could be World War III here very soon. And, we're basically awaiting Russia and China's reply, their response to this here, because this was a really aggressive act that the U.S. did. And not only that, but the way that it's being done, China had deals in place with Venezuela, as far as their oil. The United States just took it, basically just snatched it up like that's our oil now, so you got the U.S. is supplying Ukraine with weapons, and these weapons are enough to keep, Russia should have been able to crush Ukraine within a matter of months. But this is going on now, year 5, if I'm correct, that this war is going on. And that's just off the strength of the U.S. just supplying Ukraine with weapons. So right now, all eyes are on Russia and China and North Korea. It's like, hey, what are you guys doing here? So not to mention, the hopeful elect, we need Russia and China to do what it is that they have to do as well, because, potentially us, being delivered is contingent upon that. It's contingent upon these particular nations being able to destroy Babylon here. So, right now, Babylon is feeling themselves. I'm coming across a bunch of little videos like this. Their generals, their top military officials and stuff, they talking big talk right now, too. Listen to this.
And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We've seen war. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
You know, there you hear it. I mean, you just heard that, If you want war with the U.S., someone else will be raising your sons and daughters. So the U.S. talking real tough right now. They're like issuing warnings, like whoever won it, you better think about the consequences here. Someone else will be raising your sons and daughters. The U.S. right now, we've seen the U.S. before. The U.S., one thing I can say, they are able to back up, their bark with a little bit of bite. So, so these particular nations, they're in for something. Babylon ain't going to just lay down, until, Hamashiach, Yahushai comes, but we do know that these particular nations, I should say, Russia included, they are going to bomb Babylon into oblivion, basically. This place is going to be, this is going to be the lake of fire. But up until that time, I should say, Babylon is not going to lay down. They are going to bring it, like it says, the devil is going to come down with great wrath. So let's look at another video, though, of my man. This is another U.S. official here. This is if I'm correct, the Secretary of State.
Turns out the regime who chanted death to America and death to Israel was gifted death from America and death from Israel. This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change, and the world is better off for it. Turns out the regime
like I said, Babylon talking real tough right about now. So, we can clearly see where this thing is heading, though. We are right on the brink of the third woe and the deliverance of the elect of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. So, Secretary Rick Rubio of the State Department, he urges Americans to depart now from the countries below using available commercial transportation due to serious safety risks. Some of those particular countries are Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, the West Bank of Israel and Gaza, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, United Arab Emirates, or UAE, Yemen, because, right now, Iran still has, capability. All of their missile systems have not been, destroyed. But I do believe, that they are in a sense of desperation here. You lost your state leader. You lost as soon as he went down, and the next guy was promoted. Like immediately he was bombed and killed as well. And I think like 49 total officials. So like their whole leadership right now has been wiped out. So the U.S. knew exactly where they were. Israel as well, they knew exactly where they were, when to strike, and then they caught them off guard. Typically, the United States, when they conduct strategic bombing, they normally do that at night. They completely caught Iran off guard because they launched this attack throughout the day, something that the U.S. never does. So, right now the U.S. is pulling out all the stops. They every little trick in the bag right now, they're pulling it out. So it's going to get interesting, so it's going to get real interesting here. Let me see this, what I have here. In the last 24 hours, how many countries has Iran launched missiles at? Yes, those countries I just named that the State Department advised Americans to start evacuating. So in the last 24 hours, Iran has launched missile and drones at approximately 6 countries, Middle East, including UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Israel, and Iraq. So right now, they're just launching. Iran's whole goal right now, this is what you call this is a cry for help. They were just ambushed or sneak attacked by the United States and Israel. Right now, they're going to basically launch attacks on everybody. It's like I believe I read it a little bit earlier. Um, Great Britain is now joining because, hey, you're attacking our stuff. We didn't have nothing to do with it, but now you're launching missiles and hurting where we have civilian personnel. It's the same thing with France. France is joining in saying the same thing. Hey, why are you launching missiles at us? That's the United States and Israel. But right now, Iran is a little desperate. They lack leadership. They're just going to fire missiles any and everywhere because they need this to spread. They need many countries to join in, and they need their allies to join in. And this whole time, they've been hearing that, hey, we're cool with each other. North Korea, China, Russia, so where y'all at? That's what's basically running through their minds right now. And, I'm going to pretty much wrap it up shortly here. But I did come across something that pertains to this lesson as well. We know that none of this can really, the deliverance is not going to take place until this particular prophecy manifests itself. Once this thing becomes, mainstream, so to speak, that's when we can start looking like, okay, now we're really at that point where this deliverance is about to take place. So let's take a look at this here. And this is a manicure embeds a microchip into your fingernails and can be used as a contactless solution to business cards. So listen real closely.
We came up with this idea because we were thinking how to support the social distancing in beauty services by using technology. The only challenge it was how to make it small enough to fit in a fingernail. We install the information that you want, like your name, your mobile number, your social media accounts, websites as well. As you saw, I had our website link on this chip. Now I want to change this to our Instagram page. Okay, here we go. I always forget my business cards. You will not forget your nail. Dubai, like innovative city. Usually the people, they like the weird and creative ideas.
So there you have it. As of right now, these particular microchips that are being implanted into the fingernail, or the press-on fingernail, I should say, it's not used for contactless payments. It's only used as a business card. So the way it works is they have a microchip in their fingernail. They can tap your cell phone, and their particular business model, whatever it is, wherever they work or whatever business that they have that they're promoting, whatever little hustle that they're doing, it automatically directs you to their website. Now, obviously, as you can see here, if we come back, she said in the future, we hope to see these things go from digital restaurant menus to contactless payments. Of course, that's what they want next, because why would you're directing someone straight to your website by using your fingernail, but they go to your website and they still have to pull out a card to pay. No, they wanted to where I was able to tap your phone with my fingernail. Now you should be able to just make your payment online by scanning your hand after you choose whatever products or services you want from my particular website. So as you can see, that's what they're working on now. And if you look at the date real carefully on this was way back in May 12, 2021. So this was almost 5 full years ago. I'm pretty sure by now this particular technology is already embedded with the NFC that gives them, it's already NFC enabled, but now I'm pretty sure by now they have this contact ready. And so the way this means of payment ready, I should say. So, this is no longer an underground thing. This is becoming mainstream. So they're basically comfortable enough now to advertise this on a major cable news network. And you can clearly hear the woman basically say, we want to eventually set it up for customers to buy and sell. I'll play that part again, as a matter of fact.
weird and creative ideas.
Okay, so she doesn't actually say it. You have to read it across the screen. Macarum, that is the lady's name. That is her last name. Hopes the nail microchip will have other uses in the future. And then it goes on to say, from digital restaurant menus to contactless payments. So, like I said in a few previous videos, it doesn't matter who scoffs or mocks this truth at this point. You know, you're going to eventually have to make a choice. You know, this thing has gone from a little rogue websites that your average person has never heard of, like dangerous things, to being broadcast now on a major news network such as CNN. So we're right here at the end. You know, this is the final countdown, so to speak. You know, so with that being said, though, I'll end this, I should say, with this particular scripture. And I'm going to go to 1 Peter 4:7. 1 Peter 4:7. But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober and watch unto prayer. I pray this has been edifying and reaches the ears it's supposed to reach. Shalom.